Hello, Lisa and team. As requested by Lisa, I am recording a quick demonstration of the platform, and I'll run through the basics of it. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know, and we can always run through a live demo at a future date. So, just to give you a quick brief synopsis, the voluntary platform consists of two parts. You have the voluntary dashboard, which is for staff members, and you have the app mobile and the desktop app, which is used by volunteers. Essentially, you can use the dashboard to manage your volunteers, your service users or clients, your activity, expenses reporting, but you can also create what we call missions. Now, missions can be something that might be ongoing, for example, like a befriending or a mentoring, or it can be one-off things like events, classes, anything along those lines. These missions can then either be published to your entire volunteer force, to groups of volunteers, or they can be assigned to actual individuals. Volunteers then use our mobile or our desktop app. They are interchangeable, and they use the platform to find things they might be interested in. If they've got extra capacity, they can be assigned things by you, and then they've got everything in the app in order to complete the task in a safe and secure manner and then report back to you. So let's kick off by talking about clients. So what we're looking at the moment is the dashboard. So this is where you'll work from. So we have two types of clients. We have individuals. These might be your service users and people that you support. And then you have organizations. Organizations, this could be regional. So it could be, Leonard, Cheshire, London, Leonard, Cheshire, South, Northwest, whatever makes sense for you guys, but you'll kind of get a feel for that over time. So let's start by setting up a client South. Let's call it Leonard, Cheshire South. You might have the contact details of the volunteer manager for this location. You can add a relevant email as well. Then you're going to add an address. So perhaps, or just take a random address here. And as you'll see a little bit later on, you can override that address in particular instances. So we create an organization client. We've already got a whole bunch of individuals in here as well that I will use to show you a couple of examples. So we'll start with our mission section, and we have mission templates. Now think of these as essentially all of the types of activities that volunteers can conduct for you. This could be everything from befriending, mentoring, fundraising events, anything along those lines, even things like Christmas parties, anything you need volunteers for. So, how does the template work? Well, the template basically gives the structure for those missions. So it means that you don't have to keep repeating various things over and over. So let's go and look at an example like perhaps in-person befriending. So you're going to give it a name that makes the most sense, because this name is actually also used by your volunteers to search for the types of things they might be interested in. So you give it a name, you might want to give it a description as well, and then you can add the options and features that volunteers will need within the app in order to complete that mission. So, will the mission have a location? Yes, because this is in person. If it was phone befriending, perhaps you would turn that off. As you'll see later, you can add an address, or it pulls an address automatically, and volunteers can see how far away this is and also get directions once they're approved. Can they upload expense information? So perhaps you want to allow them to upload, travel receipts, anything like that. And do they need some kind of checklist? This might be just things like, say, take a face mask, remain socially distanced, whatever. A checklist might be helpful here. Then the final section it allows you to essentially say, can volunteers make contact with the client through the app, using the app at least, so they can make a call. This makes the phone number available to them. So we're going to go, okay, great. So everything looks fine to me there. That template is set up. Let's have another look at a template. So for example, we have again activity class support, shopping delivery, all these kinds of things. Now, once you've set up your templates, you shouldn't have to deal with them again unless you start doing something that's totally new and unique. Okay, so now what you can do is create actual instances of those. So let's start by creating a befriending mission. Okay, so let's go, let's call it in-person befriending now that people can hopefully meet up in some capacity. Let's find our client or service user, so say it's Robert. Now, in order to get a volunteer on this mission, you can either actually assign it to an individual, and we'll talk about that later, or you can publish this mission. When you publish, it essentially makes it available for your volunteers on the app, and they have an available missions feed. That feed is arranged by various factors, one of which is actually this priority level. So if you've got something you want to get picked up sooner, you can just bump it up that list by giving it a high priority. Now, we've also got a volunteer limit. So some tasks you may need, say, 5 volunteers. Now, what you don't want to happen is 50 volunteers turn up when you needed 5. So the way this limit works is that once 5 volunteers have claimed and been approved on a mission, it's no longer available for others. But befriending, let's say, just needs the 1 person. Now, within the description, here is where you're basically going to advise volunteers what's required of them. So maybe it's like weekly meetups. Then you might want to say something about Robert is 30, has Asperger's, or loves sport. Anything that might be helpful basically for the volunteers in order to decide whether this is something that they can go for or not. Okay. Now, because this is an in-person mission and we've said within the template that it needs a location, it will either draw a location from your client record, which here for Robert we don't have an address set up. So alternatively, you can always override an address. So perhaps I'll show you a little bit more about that when we create another type of task. Now we have groups. So essentially you can bucket your volunteers into various groups. Okay, so you can create a group and it could be in relation to regions, their level of qualification or training. So perhaps all your befrienders go through certain training that other volunteers do not. In which case you can add all of your volunteer befrienders to a group called befrienders. Now, when you have a mission that should only be seen by those types of volunteers, you can just pop it into the relevant group and be comfortable that it won't be able to be picked up by anyone else. Okay. Now the time frame is only really relevant when there is a specific time frame involved, as it sort of states. So perhaps you've got an event next Saturday, 12 till 2. You can use this time frame here, but for befriending and tasks that are ongoing, you can actually leave this blank, and it just means the mission will always remain in the volunteer's profile and they can keep coming back to it at future dates. The final page, the key feature I want to talk about here is with regards to approval. So particularly when there is a client or service user involved, they have potentially, they're at risk, they are vulnerable, they have sensitive information. So what you can do is you can require additional approval from each volunteers before they can get onto the mission. And as you'll see later, they actually can't do anything with the mission or find a contact detail or anything like that until they're actually approved. So I'm going to go, great. You can review it and create it. Fantastic. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is let's talk about some kind of event. Perhaps you've got a fundraising event. Here we go. Now this time we're going to use our organization client because, as you can understand, there isn't a specific client involved. So who is the beneficiary of this volunteering work? Well, it's yourselves. Again, we're going to pop a high priority on this and say we now need 10 volunteers. We might say bucket collections at a tube station. Maybe you might even say which tube station, whatever. The next section, as you can see here, it's drawing a location automatically from Leonard, Cheshire, south. However, this is probably an office address. It's not where people are going to meet. So you can override that to any other address if you need to. Next. And then perhaps with this instance, because anyone can be a fundraiser and hold a bucket potentially, you might want to just put this out to all your volunteers. On this occasion, there is a specific time and date involved, so perhaps it's that 12 on Saturday until 2 p.m. Fantastic. We're going to just create that mission there. Okay, so very quickly and easily we've created a couple of missions, and now they are out there for our available for our volunteers to actually claim. So as we can see here, at the moment we've got no volunteers, and we have no volunteers pending. Perhaps we want to give this to a particular individual. So let's talk about Robert and his in-person befriending. Who do we want to give this to? Who's the right person? Well, okay, we can go into our manage volunteers section and we can go to assign volunteers. And what we do is we try and make that process very straightforward for you. So you can filter down by your groups, maybe just your befrienders, and then you can see all of those registered volunteers within that group. You can see how many missions they are part of, how far away they are from that given mission, and when they last signed in, so how active they've been. If I were to go ahead and give this to Ashley Staines, he's going to receive an automated email saying, Leonard Cheshire has invited you to join a befriending mission. Go into the app to check it out. Now, if Ashley decides he can't do that, he will leave the mission, and you as staff members can be notified. But we'll talk a bit more about notifications a little bit later on. Great. Okay, now let's talk a bit about oversight. So that's a real important factor here, is what are your volunteers doing? How are things going? So I can go into an existing befriending mission here. I can look at who is the registered volunteer on this mission. It's Ashley Staines, he joined in November, and I can remove his approval if I need to. I can also go into the volunteer activity, and what we do is we track various data points. So essentially we're tracking volunteer activity within the app. So we can tell you various things in terms of when they joined a mission way back at the start, and every time they've made phone calls and submitted reports, for example. Now those reports are submitted by volunteers, and they ask for basically snippets of information that are useful to you. You can see the reports for this mission here, or on the reports page you can see them across all of your clients' missions and volunteers. What we ask for is basically how long did you spend volunteering, how did it go, potentially give us a ranking. And what we're doing is we're adding kind of more customizability to these reports as well, as discussed with Lisa. So that will be coming, and it will be great to understand from you guys what type of data you want to be able to track. Additionally, volunteers can submit safeguarding flags. Either perhaps they feel there is an action required, or there is a concern for well-being. Now, this is where we talk about email notifications. So as a staff member, I can go to my profile, go to email notifications, and I can then choose the events that I want to trigger a notification to me. So those safeguarding flags perhaps, and when volunteers request approval, or when they leave a mission perhaps. Now just to jump to my emails to show you how those look, this is an example of where a volunteer has raised a concern about a client's well-being. So this volunteer is concerned about this client, and it will give you a quick snippet as to what's been said within that report as well. Okay. Now, if I just go back into, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, folks. So if I just go back into Volunteero, now you may be asking, okay, well, perhaps the person managing befriending in London doesn't need to be notified when somebody in the north of the UK flags a concern. Well, what you can do is you can create staff roles to manage this. So if I go to users, these are all of my staff members, my colleagues. At the moment, they all have the role of a system administrator, which comes as standard, and it gives you access to everything. But you can create a role, give it a name, say it's befriending coordinator north. Okay. And what you can do is then you can give them access to the relevant groups, and then on a very granular level define exactly what they can see and do within the platform. This also dictates your email notifications. So if you are befriending coordinator for the north and all of the groups in the north, you will not receive anything in relation to groups in the south. Okay. Moving on, you can manage some expenses through here as well. So volunteers can submit records of expenses in relation to missions. So what you can see here is, when that expense was submitted, what mission and client it relates to, who the volunteer is, what the claim amount is, and they can give justification as well as their bank details here, and upload some form of evidence. This is a picture of my desk, but it might be a tube ticket, train ticket, or something like that. We then have an insights page, and you can filter this down again by your various groups to look at. Maybe you want to look at just all of your befriending programs. You can filter it down by your clients. So this again is useful where you might want to have your organization broken down into various regions and stuff like that. You can change the date range you want to look at, maybe the entire month of April so far. And then we can present to you various metrics that you can kind of see in front of you here in terms of volunteering time, your top volunteers. As we add, more data and particularly customizability around reports, we can basically add a ton of stuff to this page. You tell us what you want to see and what real-time stats you want to be able to access, and we can build that for you, no problem. Okay, moving on to our volunteer section, and I am going to continue to jump around here, so please bear with me. We have just built the ability to register volunteers, and it was something that Lisa flagged that was obviously going to be important for Leonard, Cheshire, and we totally understand that. So let me move over to here, and this is where we've been testing it. So we've got a new section called forms, and what you can do is you can create numerous forms. You might have a volunteer registration form for one role and then for another. That registration form, you can give it a name, and then what you can do is you can go into the form and start building out the fields that you want. So you might ask for first name, second name, addresses, etc. Then you can link it to where should that field appear within the platform. Okay, so you can build out a form and basically collect all of the information that you might need, add things like email references. They can agree to your terms and conditions or your policies, all of that kind of stuff you can do. This form can then be shared online because you will have a unique URL for that form, and you can share it anywhere on your website as part of a button or something like that. And then when volunteers basically submit that information, it will come into your volunteers page, and you can create a process behind that in terms of maybe it's interviewed, DBS checked, whatever. You can create the stages, and then you can manage the new volunteer through those stages. And you can then pull reports and things like that to say, okay, well, of the 100 new volunteers who have been DBS checked, who still need to be interviewed, where are people within these various stages. I hope that makes sense. This also works for service user referrals as well. So you can actually create a service user referral form, and again, add the various information, and people can submit that online and it will come directly into your client section. Okay. Within your volunteers, you can then look at your volunteer force. So here's, my 3 volunteers. I can see when they've last logged in, if they've been given an app account, and I can go within a volunteer record, see, which groups they're part of, all of their basic information. I can then see which missions they're part of, which missions they've completed in the past, and their audit log. And if ever you've got any safeguarding concerns, you can freeze their account at any time. In terms of once a new volunteer is added and then moved through the processes, at some point you will then decide to give them access to the platform. When you do that, they again will receive an email, and it's an automated welcome email that looks something like this, and it will say, Leonard, Cheshire has invited you to Volunteero. This is what Volunteero is all about. Here's how you actually get started on the app or desktop app, as well as here is a video of how to get started and our email support. As discussed with Lisa, full branding capabilities are coming down the pipeline, but what we'll do in the meantime is we'll be happy to kind of run a trial, with it as it stands, but we can discuss that at a future date. Fantastic. Okay, that's summarizes. There are a number of other features within the platform that would be helpful, but we can discuss those potentially on a live demo if we need to. Now, moving over to show you the mobile app side of things, and bear with me, I've just got to get a program up and running in order to show you this. Okay. Hopefully this looks okay in front of you, but here we go. We will open up the Volunteer app. Our main focus with the Volunteer app is one, obviously always safeguarding, but the second one is usability, because if a platform and a volunteer management platform isn't usable, you won't get the engagement from your volunteers and it will become somewhat redundant. So we've got 3 tabs along the top, real simple. We've got ongoing, and this is where volunteers can go and look at the things that they're doing or have upcoming. So maybe events they haven't gone to yet, befriending missions that they've been working on. And available is where they can go in and look for things that they might want to get involved in. So they can search the missions by various factors, the types of things they want to do, how far away it is, that sort of stuff. And when I'm on here, what can I see? Well, I can see, for example, with this in-person befriending mission, I can see how far away it is. I can go in and see the various details, the organisation that's given it to me. But as you can see, I can request approval, but all I can see is that it's about 3.9 miles away from me. I can't see an actual address, and I also can't make contact with someone. So from a safeguarding perspective, if you put that approval requirement in place, it kind of makes sure that safeguarding is always a focus here. Now, looking through here, I can look at other things that might well be of interest to me. So here's that fundraising event. I can also see when it starts, and at this one I can just go ahead and accept it because it does not need approval. Once I'm in this, I can then add it to my personal calendar. I can get directions when I need to. I can make contact with whatever number is on file for this client. Going to ongoing, let's talk about an existing mission. So say it's that time of the week when I want to call Jess. I can make a call. I can choose to hide my number or not. And if I press OK, it pops the number up on the bottom of the screen. That phone call still goes through my minutes, okay, just to let you know. Now I can submit a quick report to say how long did I spend volunteering, how was everything going, all fine. Here are those safeguarding flags where I can flag something up to you really straightforward, nice and easy if I want to, and I can just submit that report. I can also see previous reports that I've submitted in the past. And in terms of, just to show you in terms of managing kind of expenses, say, here we go. Let's say I wanted to quickly add a receipt to this. Let's say fine. And I'm going to select yes, I'd like to add a receipt. As you can see on the next page, I can add my evidence, my claim amount, and my justification, as well as bank details in the bottom field if I choose to. Okay, and in terms of their profile section, so depending on what you ask for within that volunteer registration form, there will be a lot more fields here. They might be interests related, skills related, for example. And volunteers can update that here as well at a future date. So this will feed back into your volunteer record, so you've always got the most up-to-date information on a volunteer. Brilliant. Okay, I hope all of that makes sense, and I haven't bored you stiff by the end of that. Obviously, Q&A wise, if you've got any questions, either give them to Lisa or you can come directly to me and I'd be happy to answer them. Alternatively, we can all get together at a